project for us to try. All you need is a sunny day, some toys or items to make interesting shadows, paper, and something to draw with. I'm going to try it a couple of different times at different hours of the day so we can observe the differences in the shadows. We all know the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and the amount of light and heat change throughout the day. What makes the shadows change during the day is the angle of the sun in relation to where you are on the surface of the earth. For our art project, I picked this toy fox. He will be my model, and I'm going to trace his shadow. Let's go outside.
It's 1 p.m. and I want to be able to tell the difference between the silhouettes when I'm done, so I'm going to label each drawing as I make it. The trickiest part of this art project will be making sure that I don't move the fox out of place. I think I'll start by his paws to make sure that I know where he should stand. Right here, I couldn't get the pen underneath my model at the right angle from this side of the table, so I went to the other side. The key to drawing a shadow is to not block where the light is coming from. Okay, great. All done. Now we'll wait for a while and go outside again. It's 2:30 p.m. and I'm labeling our second drawing so we know when each was done. In case you move your model a little by accident as you go, like I did, you can just scoot it back into place. There, all done. Now that we have both sketches, we can compare. See here how the shadow is longer? That's because the sun is lower in the sky. The lines are different too because the light hit different parts of the toy fox. Now you've seen me do it, it's your turn. Give it a try.
What is as big as an elephant but weighs nothing? An elephant's shadow, of course.
Have you ever heard of the words transparent, translucent, and opaque, and understand why they're even related to shadows? If you don't, no worries. I'll show you. Transparent means that light can easily pass through an object or that you can easily see through it. And I have my flashlight here and some items here so that we can illustrate transparency. Okay, so first we're going to start with our clear bottle. And here's our light. So you can see it on the wall here. And there's our bottle. So as you can see, nothing's happening. The light is going right through. And then you're getting a cool little shadow effect. Now let's try our goggles. And hopefully you can see through goggles. But here's our light. And the light's passing right through it. So right now we have two transparent objects. Next, let's talk about some translucent items. Now translucent means that some light can pass through an object and you can kind of see through it, but it's not really clear. Right now I'm going to use a coffee filter and a scarf that I folded in half to illustrate translucent items. Okay, so here's our wall and the light, and then here's our coffee filter. And as you can see, the coffee filter is blocking some of the light from passing through. Okay, now we're going to see the scarf. And the scarf, if I can manipulate it correctly, is kind of doing the same thing. Okay, and those are two translucent items. Now the last word we're going to talk about is opaque. Opaque means that no light can pass through an object and that you definitely can't see through it at all. Let's see what happens when we use our flashlight to try and penetrate a piece of purple construction paper and some foil. Okay, so here's our light and here's the construction paper. You can see it's blocking all of the light. Okay, now let's use our foil. The foil is blocking the light as well. So according to our research, shadows are created by blocking light, and the items that block light are translucent and opaque items.
Let's get literary. Let's talk about a few famous book titles with shadows. Peter and the Shadow Thieves by Dave Barry and Ridley Pearson. In the Peter and the Starcatchers series, the second book, Peter and the Shadow Thieves, take our main characters into a brand new adventure. Peter realizes that Molly and the other Starcatchers are in danger when the sinister being Lord Umbra visits the island and seems to control people through their shadows. Peter and Tinkerbell must travel to England to help save the Stardust and their friends. Peter Pan. The original was a play, and the play was written by Sir James Matthew Barrie in 1904. Many of us know the Disney animated film version released in 1953. Do you remember what made Peter's shadow special? Well, it flew away and it started doing things all on its own. How silly. To fix it, Peter sewed his shadow back onto his feet so it would stay with him always. Nicholas St. North and the Battle of the Nightmare King by William Joyce is the first in the series Guardians of Childhood. The main bad guy, Patch, is known as the King of Nightmares, and he often shows up as a shadow figure. Can Nicholas St. North defeat him? Read it yourself to find out. Nancy Drew and the Secret of Shadow Ranch by Carolyn Keene. In the 5th book of the Nancy Drew detective series, instead of a peaceful vacation, Nancy Drew finds herself faced with a new mystery to solve. Shadow Ranch is being haunted by a phantom horse and is being vandalized by an unknown person. Is the vandal really the ghost of outlaw Dirk Valentine or someone else? Read it yourself to find out. Hardy Boys and the Crisscross Shadow by Franklin W. Dixon. In this story, the Hardy Boys find the missing deed to a Native American's land, prevent a phony salesman from carrying through a reckless scheme, and help their father solve a top-secret case. Check it out from the library to read this old-school children's book. One of the most famous characters to ever go by the name with the word shadow in it is the Shadow, from a mystery drama radio play that premiered in August of 1930. People loved the story so much, books were written to continue the Shadow's adventures. Now, I'm sure y'all have heard of the Percy Jackson series. One of the characters in it, Nico D'Angelo, displays special shadow powers. To find out more about him in this Greek mythology series, read the second book, The Titan's Curse.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to present to you Shadow Puppets. Yay!
Hey, Shadow. Yeah? Who would like to see a puppet show made by Shadow Puppets? Ooh, I do. Okay, give me a show of hands. Yay!
Shadows by Amos Russell Wells. Gloomy the earth on shadowless days, sad and monotonous, ghostly with haze. Gloomy the sky with clouds overrun, for the days without shadows are days without sun. Bright is the earth where dark shadows lie, cast by the beams of glittering skies. Praise for the shadows when earth days are done, for the darker the shadow, the brighter the sun.
Oh, I'm being followed by a moon shadow, moon shadow, moon shadow. Leaping and hopping on a moon shadow, moon shadow, moon shadow. And if I ever lose my way, lose my path, help me out, 'cause I'm being guided by a moon shadow. Moon shadow, moon shadow.
Did you know that sometimes the moon casts a shadow on Earth? It's true, we call this a total solar eclipse. I've been lucky enough to have had the chance to see 2 solar eclipses. One in Venezuela, South America, and the other one a little closer to home in Nashville, Tennessee. A solar eclipse happens whenever the moon ends up between the Earth and the sun. When that happens, the sun's light is being blocked by the moon and the shadow falls on Earth. It's a strange feeling to have the sky and everything around you go dark in the middle of the day. We call this part of the eclipse totality. Birds stop chirping, a hush falls over the area, and when you look up into the sky, you see the sun's corona peeking out around the moon. Take a look at this video I took during the 2017 eclipse. Notice in the background of this video how bright and sunny everything looks, but as the moon continues to cover up the sun, it gets dark very quickly. Also, notice that I'm wearing special glasses. These are solar eclipse glasses, so that way I can observe the sun safely without hurting my eyes. Once the moon has completely covered up the sun, it's safe for me to take my glasses off. You can also see that the sky looks darker and more like twilight, just without the orange and red colors. Oh my god. I'm a little embarrassed by that video, but I was just so excited watching the eclipse. In the time leading up to and after totality, the light from the sun has an odd color and gives the world a strange feel. The light becomes more orange, and you can tell the light is getting dimmer. There are also shadow bands that run along the ground. Shadow bands are hard to pick up on camera, but you should be able to see the wavy lines in this clip. They're caused by the refraction of light by Earth's atmosphere as the sun turns into a crescent. Solar eclipses are rare because the moon's orbit around Earth wobbles. Most of the time the shadow from the moon is either above or below the Earth. So if you get the chance to see one, consider yourself very lucky.
Shadows get a bad rap sometimes. They can be used to build suspense or a spooky atmosphere. But the thing about shadows is, they don't exist without a light source. So if you see a shadow and it feels spooky, look around. There's a light coming from somewhere. Now you may have heard that light travels in a wave. Not this kind of wave, this kind of wave. You can't see light waves, but this is how they're drawn. One reason you can't see them is that they move so quickly. You may have heard this phrase, so I'm going to let you fill in the last word. Faster than the speed of? But in fact, nothing moves faster than light. Light moves through space at 186,000 miles per second. For context, the fastest I've ever traveled is on an airplane, which goes 500 miles per hour, or only 8.3 miles per second. Compare that to the speed of light. Super-fast light waves move in rays, which are always straight lines regardless of the source of the light. They never curve, so when they hit an opaque object, do you remember what the word opaque means? They are blocked from reaching the other side, and they're either absorbed or reflected. We see a shadow in the area where the light is blocked. Let's do some experimenting. I have a light, and I'm going to use it to make a shadow with this owl. What happens to the shadow when I bring the light source closer to the object? And farther away? The size of a shadow depends on the distance between the light source and the object, and the shadow is usually bigger the closer the object gets to the light source. Let's think about why that is. Light rays shoot out from the source of the light, and if they're closer to the object, more of them are going to be blocked by the object. How about if we change the distance between the object and the surface of where the shadow will be? So let's see. I'll leave my flashlight where it is and move the owl away from the surface where the shadow is. When you increase the distance, you get a bigger shadow. When you decrease it, you get a smaller shadow. Let's look at what happens when we change the angle of the light source relative to the object. What happens to the shadow? We observed earlier in the episode that our shadow changes throughout the day, and that's because the sun moves through our sky throughout the day. Of course, what we observe to be the sun moving through the sky is actually our angle, the Earth's angle, changing relative to the sun as we orbit around it. This phenomenon of shadows changing proportionally to the Earth's movement relative to the sun is also illustrated by shadow clocks or sundials, possibly the oldest way humans have kept track of time. The oldest known sundial was created in Egypt in the 13th century BC, but people were almost certainly putting sticks in the ground to tell time with shadows long before that. Imagine if you didn't have a clock. How would you tell time? The sun's movement through the sky changes pretty reliably from day to day, so it makes sense that people kept time based on this movement. It's tough to get sundials now to tell clock time accurately, but it can be done. If you're interested in making your own sundial at home, there are several good tutorials online. Speaking of how shadows were used in the ancient world, have you ever heard of shadow puppetry? Shadow puppetry has existed in China since at least the Tang Dynasty in the 8th century AD. Shadow puppet stories in China are used to share history and cultural values as well as for entertainment. Shadow puppetry is also part of the ancient history of India. In India, shadow puppet stories are usually used to retell stories from Indian epics, like from the Mahabharata, during Hindu festivals. Shadow puppetry also spread to other countries like Java, Bali, Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, and Malaysia. Check out how this puppeteer in Bali moves the puppet from behind the scenes.
Hello. I do warm up first, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 100, 101, 102, 1,000. Every puppeteer in Bali, they are opening their performance with this one. Yeah. And then the movement, one time here and one time here. It's always balance. And then they also turn. The movement is symbolizes of the world. Always, move. Yeah. And then come in this side. And then we put in center. When finished, also we put in the center. Also, we for good character, we put in right side here, and then bad we have in left side. Yeah.
Shadow puppets across East and Southeast Asia are made in a similar style. They are typically carved out of translucent leather made from animal skins and colored with translucent dye. Do you remember what the word translucent means? Puppets are often carved by hand and can be incredibly intricate. Once the puppets are done, they are attached to sticks, which the puppeteers use to control them. The puppets are held in front of a cloth screen, and a light is shown from behind to create colorful shadows on the screen. Notice how the colors are visible in this shadow puppet from China. Stay tuned to learn how to make your own shadow puppet.
Shadows aren't just for telling time or making puppets. It's also important for maintaining animal safety. Did you know that when you are in the shade, you can feel 10 to 15 degrees cooler? That is because you are avoiding solar radiation. It is important to remember, if you're a farmer or a pet owner, that animals like dogs and chickens don't have as efficient sweat glands. In fact, chickens can't sweat at all, and dogs can only sweat through their nose and their paws. So, have some empathy and remember that animals feel the heat too. When you're setting up their home or the backyard, be sure that there's some bushes, a tree, or you can even set up some shade for the animals, because it's really important for them to stay hydrated and cool. That's just some cool facts.
Try this.
Today's science experiment is pretty sweet, mostly because it involves chocolate. We're gonna test and see if the shade can keep our chocolate cool enough so it doesn't melt. This part is called the hypothesis, also known as stating the question we want to answer with the experiment. We'll make 2 identical environments, with each one labeled on a piece of foil to tell us which one is which. This step of keeping things as close to the same as possible is how we reduce the variables that might change the outcome of our experiment and give us misleading results. Now, it's time to test it. Let's go outside.
As you can see, we're outside here on the back patio. It's only about 70 degrees today, so it's not very hot. Let's place one in the sun and one in the shade of this umbrella. 1 hour later, now we need to know if the sun was hot enough to melt the chocolate without the shade. Yep, very melty. Now on to the one in the shade. Testing it, we see that the shadow of the umbrella kept the temperature low enough that the chocolate did not melt. We have our hypothesis, experiment, results, and conclusion. Science is mostly about observing what you see, testing it, and writing it down. Now it's your turn.
Hey there! Since the sun was shining through this window behind me, I thought we could make some hand shadow puppets. This dog is my go-to. But I don't know if my cat likes dogs. What do you think? Oh, and if you put your hands like this, you can make a pretty cool wolf. I just learned how to do this one. Let's see. Oh, the thumb up for the ear. There we go. Ow, woo! Ow, ow, ow! Oh, did you see my cat? I don't know if he likes that wolf. He may have been scared.
Are you tired of the same old games? Then grab some friends, head outside for some no-contact fun in the sun with Shadow Tag. Use your shadow to try to tag your friend's shadow. Try Shadow Tag today.
Shadow puppets have been around for a very long time, but today I'm going to show you how to turn a box into your very own shadow puppet theater. For our project, we of course need a box. Any size box will do. You're also going to want some tape. You want something to cut open your box. I'm using a cardboard knife. And you can also use some markers to dress up the outside of your theater. You'll also need some tissue paper. You can use any color that you'd like. I'm gonna go ahead and use the classic white color and a pair of scissors. The first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut off the front flap and the back flap of my box. That way it leaves just the side flaps. Now that those are cut off, I went ahead and traced out the shape of my theater, and now I'm gonna cut that out as well. Now that I've gotten the front proscenium arch cut, I'm gonna go ahead and flip over the box and cut open the back completely. There we go, I've cut everything out. I'm gonna use a little bit of tape here on the back just to tape the top of my box to make sure it's sturdy. It's a little weak now. All right, that will help it stay up a little bit better. Now I'm gonna go ahead and flip it over and decorate my proscenium arch. All right, there we go. There's the front of my theater. I have the comedy and tragedy masks up on the proscenium arch. Now it's time to go ahead and put in our tissue paper. Okay, now that I have my tissue paper cut out, I'm gonna go ahead and cover up the opening for the proscenium arch. I'm gonna use my tape and go ahead and tape it into place. Make sure that it's pretty taut. You want a nice smooth surface for your shadows to project on. Now that you finish your theater, you can put a light source behind it. I'm using an LED flashlight on a mug, and you're ready to perform your first show. This is a really fun project because you can customize a lot of things about this project, such as trying different sized boxes or maybe even different types of light.
So we've already learned a couple activities you can do with shadows, but here's one more. Let's make some shadow puppets. To make our shadow puppets, we're going to need things like some paper, scissors, craft sticks, pencil, some tape. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so if you don't have anything to create patterns like this, that's okay, because you can create something more simple like shapes. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our paper, and it doesn't have to be black, but it needs to be some sort of darker color. And then you're going to take a shape, or you can freehand it and trace it. And I already have a couple more drawn on my paper. And so once you're done with that, you're just gonna go ahead and cut it out. So there's one, and then I'm just gonna cut out another circle. Okay, so I'm gonna get rid of all of this. And then we have one more step, and that's taping our stick to the back of our puppet. So there's one, and then two. Okay, now we're done.
Thank you. I'm here to perform with my friends the Shadows, and I'm so glad to be here because I learned how to play ukulele by checking out library books from the Fort Worth Public Library. Yay! I hope you like it. Curtain up.
We are both shadows in the nighttime. on the wall, just dancing like we do. We're made of paper and a straw. You can design me any way you like. I'll play for hours without batteries. We'll make a story, 'cause you learn, dream, and do with the Fort Worth Public Library. The end. Shadows are so much fun. You can make up stories and characters. I'd love to see if you made any shadow puppets. Haha, I hope you try it.
It's time for Shakespeare Says.
If we shadows have offended, think but this, and all is mended, that you have but slumbered here while these visions did appear.
This has been Shakespeare Says.
We hope you've enjoyed today's show on shadows, but the fun doesn't stop here. If you like fiction books, check out The Book of Elsewhere, Dark Shadows, or Shadow Weaver, or Notebook of Doom, Attack of the Shadow Smashers, or The Chicken Squad, Dark Shadows. If you're interested in starting your own shadow puppet theater troupe, then you might want to check out Making Shadow Puppets from our collection. If you like coding, you can learn how to add a shadow to elements on your website by visiting the w3schools.com website. We'll make sure to put a link in the description. If you want to see a fun shadow performance, then take a look at this TEDx Alcatraz performance of Dreaming of Lucid Living. If you're interested in designing lights for theater, then check out this free visualizer called Visual Light Lab 2010 and download the free demo software. That's going to do it for today's show, but we'll see you all next week.